So we're going to talk about how to get your sinuses really cleared out so you can breathe and you can smell things. But of course, it's allergy season and a lot of people are getting allergies from that. But if you have chronic sinus problems all year round, that usually is an infection, either a virus, fungus, could be mold, it could be bacteria, but it's living up into the sinuses. So there's several things that you want to do. One is use a combination of echinacea oil and tea tree oil as a mist. You can put a couple drops of this in your hot bath in a nebulizer, which basically is turning this liquid into a mist, or a neti pot where you're taking hot water, putting a couple drops of each and letting it go up into the sinuses. And I'm going to create a separate video on exactly what's happening, but it's going to thin mucus, it's going to strengthen your immune system, it's going to reduce inflammation and make it very unfriendly for those pathogens to exist. The next thing I'm going to recommend is to take this orally: garlic pills, oregano oil pills, and clove pills. Okay. These are my three favorite to act as an antibiotic. You take that internally and it'll actually make it very difficult for the pathogens to exist. The next thing is to drink on a regular basis apple cider vinegar. This will do many things, and I've done extensive videos on this, but to drink this on a regular basis will help shift your pH in the right direction to make it very unfriendly for those pathogens to exist. I would recommend to dilute in a glass of water about 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and you can add other things into it if you want to add ginger or lemon juice, but I don't recommend doing the Bragg's anymore. Why? Because if you look in the back of the label, I don't know how long ago they started doing this, but they started to dilute their apple cider vinegar. If you look at the ingredients, it'll say certified organic apples and purified water. Okay, it's at, I think, 5% acidity. So basically, they're diluting it. So I found another company that I'm using right now, and this is the one that I like. You can check it out. Fairchild. Okay, Fairchild's by Golden Valley Vinegar. Now, what I like about this, it's just straight certified organic apples and no water. It's very, very strong, and it's the real deal. It's raw, unfiltered. It has the mother. It's unpasteurized. So it's very, very delicious, but this is the one I'm going to recommend, not Bragg's. So anyway, you can use this combination to clear out your sinuses and finally breathe again.
So if you have any type of, excuse me, one second. Oh man. Any problem with mucus in your throat, today we're going to talk about how to get rid of it using salt. Very, very simple. This is part of a series of 3 different videos to address this problem from different angles. So whether you have sinus mucus or mucus in the inner ear or coming from your tonsils or up from the throat, we're going to get into it. So I'm not sure if you know this, but salt is really good for anything bacterial, fungal, yeast, and mold. Even if you think about how they cure meat, they add salt to actually raw meat to stop any type of bacterial growth. And even when you make sauerkraut, you have this bacteria that is fermenting this cabbage, but then when they want to stop it, they add salt to it. Then it stabilizes this stage of making sauerkraut. I want to explain what salt does to these microbes, okay? If we take a look at my little chart right here, if we put salt on either a bacteria, a fungus, a yeast, or a mold, the salt concentration is a lot more outside than inside, right? Inside you have water, and water tends to flow towards a concentrated salt mixture. So the water is going to move out of the cell into the extracellular area right here, turning this bacteria into a shriveled, dehydrated, dead particle. So the salt will kill bacteria, fungus, mold, and yeast through dehydration. Another cool thing that the salt will do is it'll thin mucus. So a lot of times people get this really thick mucus that won't come out of their bodies. Well, you can use salt to loosen it up. How does it do that? The same mechanism. It takes the water out of the mucus, it breaks it up, and it thins the mucus. So we have 2 things going on. We have the inhibiting of the microbial growth and the killing of microbes. And we also have the thinning of the mucus. So this is really good for an infection anywhere in your respiratory tract. You could have a post-nasal sinus drip situation. That's leaking down into the back part of the sinuses into the throat. You could also have a situation where there's an ear infection and there's mucus buildup through the eustachian tubes on either side, and that can end up in the throat as well. And so here you are trying to get rid of the throat infection, but it keeps coming from the ear. So the source is the ear, the effect is the throat. So you have to be able to handle where it's originating from. And also if it's in the sinuses, you have to handle that as well. So this mucus can be originating from the sinus, from the ear, or even from the tonsils, which are little immune glands in the back part of the throat, which can swell up, especially in children, and be a source of infection. But really, the tonsils are trying to fight off the infection and protect any invading of the microbes deeper into the body. So it intends to create defenses, and it creates inflammation, and a lot of times you'll end up with a sore throat. On occasion, some of the mucus could be coming up from the esophagus because you have either acid reflux that's irritating the esophagus, or you could have some mucus that's coming up from the lungs. So there's many different things that you can do related to salt, from very expensive to very inexpensive. So let's start with the least expensive thing you can do. You can basically take a teaspoon of sea salt. Now, as far as the salt that I recommend, I don't recommend using table salt because they have so many additives in there, anti-caking agents, and you really don't know the source of where they got that refined product. I would highly recommend you find a good rock salt, something that has been preserved, that hasn't been exposed to plastics and pollution in our oceans. A lot of times people will use Himalayan sea salt, but I will mention if you're going to use one of the therapies that I'm going to recommend, I think usually when you buy one of these units, which I'm going to explain, it comes with its own rock salt. And so in that case, maybe you don't want to put Himalayan sea salt because that does have a bit more iron. But certain units also just use sodium chloride. So let's say, for example, you're not going to get those units. You're just going to use some sea salt. Himalayan sea salt is a really good one. What you're going to do is you're going to take a teaspoon of this sea salt and dissolve it in a glass of water. And you're going to drink that down. Just by drinking it down, you're going to expose everything in your mouth and the throat area to this salt. Plus, the salt's going to go inside the body and strengthen something called the autonomic nervous system, which especially focuses in on this flight or fight mechanism. It tends to improve that. So many people will get results just from drinking some salt water. So you want to heat up the water to a certain degree so you can dissolve the salt in there. So you have the option of drinking it or using it as something you can gargle with, right? So you drink this salt water, you gargle it, get the back of your throat all exposed to this seawater, and you're going to start to improve your immune system because it's going to kill up the microbe and start loosening up this mucus. So salt water gargles are great, but just remember, when you gargle with this, make sure you dilute the salt in the water. You may want to also add a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. I like Fairchild's because it's a little more concentrated and it's more pure. But apple cider vinegar changes the pH and it kills microbes as well. So we're not only going to dehydrate the microbes, thin the mucus, but we can actually also kill the microbes by adding this apple cider vinegar, which is acetic acid. Now, I'm not telling you to put this straight concentrated acid into your body because that's going to irritate it, especially if you have a sore throat. You want to dilute it like 1 teaspoon in a glass of water to make it more diluted. But both salt and apple cider vinegar works really good for an antibacterial effect as well as an anti-inflammatory effect. The next thing you have an option to do is get a neti pot. A neti pot is something called a nasal irrigation, in which you're going to pour some salt water up into your sinuses through here, and it's going to come out the other side over the sink. So the reason I like that is that you're using this diluted salt water, and it's very gentle to your sinuses. You're not using any chemicals, and it seems to really thin the mucus, and you will notice that when you blow your nose, a lot of mucus will come out. If you have a postnasal drip all year round, suspect a fungal infection or some type of mold growing in your sinuses, because that would indicate it's not seasonal. And hopefully you're going to change your diet and come off any sugar, because sugar feeds this mold and candida and fungus. You'd probably want to do like a nasal irrigation neti pot maybe every other day until it's completely settled down. The problem with some people is they get their sinuses scraped out and they might get surgery. And now they damage this very delicate layer of skin that has all these good bacteria to protect you against pathogens. So in another video, I talked about using a drop of diluted kimchi juice and a little cotton swab to add that microbiome into the sinuses to give you relief. There's some great data on that. Now, the next thing you can do is use a
humidifier, which basically turns a liquid into a vapor.
And so you would use this while you're sleeping, right? You turn it on, you put your salt water in there, and you let it run all night long. So you can actually breathe this into your body, into your lungs, and it can help to thin the mucus. One more thing I would recommend is to really bundle up and get warm when you're in bed, because a lot of times these infections, especially if it's in the lower part of the respiratory area, or even the higher part, the upper respiratory, that can be viral. And so antibiotics don't work. And so you want to heat your body up and generate more like a natural fever. So you want to bundle up, get in your bed, stay warm, and try to sweat so you can cook these viruses with temperature. And so we're going to kill them with dehydration, kill them with an acid, kill them with heat. And then the next thing you can do is what's called halotherapy, which is a couple options. You can actually go somewhere and they have these salt caves that you can go in, or there's halotherapy machines, which basically are like a dry salt machine that puts this dry salt out into the air. And they usually come with their own type of salt, which is purified sodium chloride. And I don't think they use sea salts. They may, I'm not sure. But these halotherapy machines are a little bit more expensive. So if you can afford one, they might be worth it. Now, let's say, for example, you do this and it's just not working. It could be the source of your infection is coming from an ear infection or some type of microbe in the eustachian tubes, which can get really clogged up. For that, you have several options. You can just take a drop of this seawater and put it about 4 drops or 5 drops in each ear. Let it go in there, kind of shake it out. And what that will do, it will create a thinning of the mucus through here and kill off those microbes. You can also do the same thing with diluted apple cider vinegar, not concentrated, just a few, like maybe 4 or 5 drops of that diluted apple cider vinegar in the water, 1 teaspoon per glass, and you would put that in each ear. So you have different options of things you can do based on your feeling comfortable about it. There's something else you can do. You can add 1 drop of garlic oil in each ear. That works really well. It kills the microbe and allows this thing to clear out. And of course, you also have this acid reflux thing. If that is the problem, you have to watch my video down below on how to get rid of acid reflux. But you're going to know if you have acid reflux because you're going to have digestive issues. You might have heartburn. You might feel it indigestion down here. Typically, this is not going to be the issue. It's mainly going to be either coming from the sinuses or even the tonsils. So the gargling will really help. Now, on top of all of this, I would highly recommend you take vitamin D. There's a large amount of data on the relationship between kids that have enlarged tonsils and a vitamin D deficiency, kids and adults that have sinus allergies, sinus mucus, and low vitamin D, ear infections, okay, in people with vitamin D deficiencies. And so just the fact that vitamin D receptors are in every single cell in your body, including almost every single immune cell, it makes sense to take vitamin D and probably at least 20,000 IUs. One little extra strategy that I would use instead of taking regular doses of vitamin D for something like this is I would just take 50,000 IUs of vitamin D once a week. That way you get this shotgun effect and you can actually speed up the clearing of this mucus. Now, if you haven't seen how to get rid of respiratory mucus with salt, you have to check that video out. I put it up right here.